welcome back to the Hardware News Recap of the Week. We have a lot going on right now, so we're preparing to fly out to Taiwan to do Computex, which is the industry's biggest trade show. Taipei is also my favorite place to be, so we have some cool content coming up for that. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Microsoft's Xbox prices going up. Not really a big surprise right now, especially following Nintendo's bold move to increase its game prices. Microsoft said, hey, wait a minute, that's a good idea for shareholders and making money, lots of it. Asetek and their patent will be expiring. Well, Asetek's not expiring. Maybe different topic over whether they should. Asetek is considering selling its liquid cooling business or part of it, and its patent, additionally, is expiring. So that is going to be a big change in the liquid cooler business for the companies that weren't just ignoring the patent and doing whatever the fuck they wanted anyway. Additionally, I joined Bloomberg for one of their podcasts. They asked us to come on to talk about the video we did, the documentary about the tariffs impact of the hardware industry. So that should be live on their channel either today or soon. And then as far as the Computex stuff, so just to give everyone a timeline, by the time this episode airs, we're going to be pretty close to leaving for the show. So we get there early. We're going to do a bunch of different company visits where we're looking at new stuff, some testing labs that'll be fun for filming and showing some of the behind the scenes of what the companies use to prepare and develop and test their products. But also I have one fun and sort of special video I want to do where we're going to look at the culture of computer DIY and salvage and PC building in Taiwan. So we've done stuff like this in the past, but it's been years. And we've got a sort of a tour guide set up locally, and we're going to go around to a bunch of different shops, film it, and it'll be fun for everyone. So check that out in the next couple weeks. But let's get into the news. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Antec Flux series of cases. We previously benchmarked and independently reviewed the Flux Pro case and found it to be one of the best cases we tested last year. The Flux Pro features the modern trend of wood accents while also focusing on a high airflow design. We found its performance to be among the best in our thermal testing. The case also has a number of ease of installation features to make assembly and cable management easier. Learn more at the link in the description below. Quick Jan announcement first. So last week we posted our garage sale items where we're putting stuff that we tested in the lab that we bought to review up for sale for cheap. So that already went live. And this week we're listing B stock Modmats at discounted prices. So we know right now, I mean, in the news, basically every week, we're talking about prices going up for things. We're trying to find something where we can get the prices down. There's not a ton of options right now. Eventually, probably some of our stuff will have to go up as well based on what I'm seeing right now, but we still have inventory, so I'm holding it where it is at the moment. But B stock Modmats is an area where we can actually drop the price or something, and we want to do that while people just are getting sick of seeing price hikes everywhere. So do something that's a bit lower, which is a little different. So this is for our 4 foot by 2 foot or 122 or so centimeter by 60 centimeter Modmats. They've been $100 since they launched in 2017. This is going to be for the Volt edition of them. Now, if you adjust for inflation from 2017 to today, it should probably be like $120 already, but we're keeping it at $100. I'm trying to do the Arizona T model. Like, they've got their $1 T. We're trying to keep the Modmats where they are. But the B stock Modmats, so these are stockpiled Modmats that were just below our quality threshold. Talk about why. Those are going to be $70. So these are for the Volt Modmats. They're still great quality. They just have some issues with them where we pulled them out of the retail stock over the years. For example, some of them are about 1 to 2 millimeters thinner than we wanted. Some have anti-static conductivity slightly out of the spec that we were targeting in our testing. We do testing on a lot of them when we pull them. Some might have minor paint defects. Some are like a quarter or a half an inch shorter than what we wanted. But rather than just throw them out, we're going to make them available. And these are unused, so they haven't been sold before. It's just their B stock. Basically, whenever we get shipments in, we do QC and intake to try and filter for any products that didn't meet our standards. I'm part of that process a lot of the time. We often donate these to the local computer engineering classes at the high school that Stone teaches at, but they're already pretty stocked on Modmats, so we've been stockpiling these for a while now, and we're really just not sure what to do with the rest of them. Now, typically this stuff just basically ends up in the garbage if it doesn't get donated, but since they're still perfectly usable, and we're also trying to find stuff to bring pricing down for people, we don't want to generate the waste, and it's a time where prices are climbing everywhere. We wanted to put these up as B stock. It's actually inspired by EVGA and their old B stock model that they had, because I saw some comments over the last couple of months, people talking about missing that model. So a couple things here. First of all, these are considered B stock. They're still good, but they're not as good as what we want to normally sell. The reason we typically don't release B stock is, like most companies, you don't want to put something out there where it's not representative of your best, and you just don't want it kind of like out there where someone can be disappointed in it or whatever. And so the best way to deal with that, I think, is to just very transparently be like, this is B stock. Here's the list of things that might be a problem with it. If you're cool with that, here you go. It's a lot cheaper. And if not, then of course we have the normal sort of full, I don't know if you call it A stock or whatever. Real talk, after freight, distribution costs, manufacturing costs, QC cost, and warehousing costs, we're not making money on the B stock mats, but we're putting them out there. I mean, it'll let me reclaim some of it at least. And then the lowest I think we've ever sold a large mod mat for has been $90 with the 10% off codes. So this is the cheapest that the large ones are going to get. But anyway, hopefully some people like that. It's an option for you if you want it, and it's at least cheaper when everything else is going up. So eventually our prices will be affected too from what it looks like right now, but like I said in the Tariffs video, we are holding them as long as we possibly can, and I bought a ton of inventory last year, so hopefully that'll be for a while longer. All right, up next, and you can head over to store.gamersnexus.net if you want to grab one. It supports us in the process. We don't have a ton of them, but we hopefully have supply for a couple months. We'll see, though, how many people buy it. All right, Microsoft significantly raising Xbox prices worldwide. Wow. It's almost like this is going to be in the news regularly for a while. Microsoft has announced that it will be raising the price of its Xbox hardware and its games, and that is effective already now, May 1st. So these price increases affect the US most, but they do affect everybody somewhat. The impacts will be felt globally, with thegamesbusiness.com writing, quote, the US is seeing the steepest price increases, with the Xbox Series X increasing by $100 to $600, the base Series S rising to $80 to $430. In Europe, they say, the Series X console has increased by 50 euros to 600 euros, with the base Series S model also up 50 euros to 350. And in the UK, prices are up just £20 for the Series X, now up to £500, and the base Series S is now £50 more expensive at 300 GBP, end quote from the games business. In addition to hardware, Microsoft also revealed that its upcoming games will see a price hike, with the company writing, quote, we also expect to adjust the pricing of some of our new first-party games starting this holiday season to $80, end quote. And currently there's no word on what specific games might be impacted. This seems to mirror Nintendo's recent decisions to increase its own games MSRP though. The price increase also affects Xbox peripherals. IGN, which is at least 50% better than us, or we're 33% worse than them, reported the following. Quote, price increases are taking effect globally, with the exception of headset prices, which are only going up in the US and Canada, end quote. This news follows the price increases to Sony's PlayStation 5, which went up £40 or $50 across Australia, the UK, and Europe. Compared to the PS5, however, Microsoft's Xbox console has been lagging behind. Last year, GameSpot reported that PS5s were shipping 5 times the Xbox consoles. So actually, you know what, in that respect, there's not actually a price increase, because if you multiply 0 by anything, it's 0. Even if Microsoft is selling infinitely fewer Xboxes, Xbox N than the PlayStation 5, it's still not a price increase, because you do have to sell it at the price for it to increase. So checkmate, gamers.
Growth.
Explaining its reasoning behind the price increases, Microsoft stated, quote, we understand that these changes are challenging, and they were made with careful consideration given market conditions and the rising cost of development. Looking ahead, we continue to focus on offering more ways to play more games across any screen and ensuring value for Xbox players, end quote. The hardware price increases are almost certainly due to the recently imposed tariffs, especially when considering the fact that Xbox consoles are primarily produced in China, though regions like Australia, the UK, and Europe may be more isolated from these tariffs' impact. With Microsoft being a US-based company, though, the price increases were likely implemented internationally to spread out the financial impact, and just to make more money. International companies that are big enough to have multiple distribution centers can bring their stuff into different ports in different countries and not have to pay a US tariff for it. However, they are probably largely cost averaging, and it's going to be for a few reasons. One of them is greed. The other one is for actual, because the price went up reasons, but by cost averaging it across everywhere, they can suppress the price increases in regions that are most heavily affected. So those are probably the two main reasons. As for games, we come back to greed. So digital downloads are not currently subject to tariffs as far as we understand here at GN. We're not experts in them, but my understanding currently is that digital video game downloads do not have a tariff attached to them specifically. That might change because in the last couple weeks, actually in the last week, there's been talk of a new 100% tariff on films produced outside of the US. And so who knows, that could happen to video games too, not really sure. But right now, that's not the case. But Xbox is still increasing its game prices for first-party games as much as to the $80 MSRP now. And here's what we think is going on there. We think that this one falls under the greed category squarely. Microsoft has very likely wanted to increase its games price for a long time. They probably saw Nintendo do it. Nintendo blinked first. They said, screw it, we're going to charge $80, and everyone's going to deal with it. Microsoft now gets the benefit of Nintendo taking all the flack for the period of time they did about the game price increases. People have somewhat gotten it out of their system, and now they get the benefit from Nintendo starting the process of easing all the consumers into the new norm of, fuck you, it's $80. So it's kind of cover fire, and then by doing this at the same time as the hardware increases, which actually are affected by tariff, like legitimately they are affected by import taxes, by doing it at the same time, they get more cover fire, where it's all happening at once. It eases the acceptance. Consumers are going to be exhausted, and it's a lot to keep track of, and probably people were outraged at Nintendo already, so Microsoft gets to sort of slip in there and bump everything. All right, up next, Asetek may sell off its liquid cooling business, or parts of it. Asetek recently released its Q1 2025 earnings report, and in that report, the company revealed its liquid cooling operations plans to its investors. The company's statement reads, quote, Asetek has received an indication of interest concerning its liquid cooling business. Such interest has increased in relevance, and discussions are taking place with multiple parties related to a potential partnership focused on utilization of the current dormant data center related liquid cooling asset portfolio, end quote. Whether or not a partnership or a sell-off is happening is unclear at this point. Asetek added, though, quote, discussions are ongoing and no agreements, terms, or commitments have been entered into by the company at this stage, and it's uncertain whether any formal agreements will materialize, end quote. Now, if you don't know, Asetek has long held a patent that has until May 6th this year protected liquid coolers that basically amounted to a pump-on-block solution. So that patent protection is expired, and Asetek had a mixed history of success enforcing it. So it successfully sued some companies, and then it unsuccessfully sued some companies over a pump-on-block type design in DIY enthusiast cooling and elsewhere. And Asetek was, at one point, the largest supplier of DIY liquid cooling solutions. They used to supply Corsair, NZXT, EVGA, a bunch of other companies, and that has dwindled significantly, especially with their legal enforcement. So with that patent now expiring, the companies that didn't decide to just ignore it and do whatever they wanted, those companies, like the US-based ones, now have a lot of opportunities open to them where they don't have to play these games anymore of running a hose out of the block and back into the top to try and avoid a patent. They can just do it the way they think works best. So that may open up a lot of options in the liquid cooling market that will probably be a lot cheaper, and it is probably hurting Asetek a lot right now that they're not going to have that anymore. I mean, it was basically like a patent enforcement company at one point it did supply, and it did iterate on the design, but the reason people used it realistically was because they were getting sued if they didn't. So that's going to change things for the consumer market, hopefully in a good way. Up next, another Battlemage GPU rumor. Last time, the rumor for a Battlemage GPU was that it was canceled. This time, it's that it's not. What'll happen next week? Aren't rumors fun and useful? Self-awareness aside, hardware leaker Hayes recently spotted in what looks like a shipping manifest aluminum material that's in transit for the design of a, quote, BMG-G31 solution. The leaker tweeted out the question, quote, what did they mean by this? Question mark, end quote. And then attached a screenshot of a spreadsheet that reads, quote, elastomer test socket, cylindrical multi-contact connector 5A, made of aluminum FR4, designed for BMG-G31, end quote. The date is listed as March 29th, and the leaker added, quote, these shipments were to Intel Vietnam, where they produced the limited edition cards, end quote. This isn't necessarily for a gaming device. It could be for a non-gaming device. It could be a test product. We don't know. If Intel's going to say anything, it will probably be within the next 2 weeks at Computex, so we'll know pretty soon. All right, let's move on. So since publishing our 3-hour-long documentary about the impact of the tariffs rollout, so specifically the way it's rolling out, not just the percentage number, there were a few lingering thoughts and some stuff that didn't get published. So to be clear here, as we get into this topic, these are unstructured ramblings from me. This is not like special qualifications. I don't have special information. It's stuff I was like, this is interesting to me. Maybe other people will also find it interesting. But if you don't, then just skip to the next time bar in the timestamps. So anyway, this is I've been in the industry for a while. I've seen the factories, maybe there's something here to talk about. The quick version is that I was thinking about factories, and the thing I was thinking about is that some of these factories, so Deepcool in the past, which is banned in the US now, we'll get into that, but Deepcool and Cooler Master as an example, they own their own factories. This is pretty rare in the computer hardware industry. So they make stuff that they also brand and sell. But what they also do is contract manufacturing. So this is what I was thinking about that didn't make it into that video. I think what we're gonna see is a strategic opportunity for companies that do own their own factories and that do contract manufacturing potentially for their own competitors who are also their customers. I think those factory owning companies might have a window here where they can potentially eat some more of that margin because their cost is naturally going to be below what their customer is paying just because of how it works. I mean, it's kind of like NVIDIA selling an FE card, right? Where NVIDIA makes the silicon, it doesn't need to pay the markup to sell the silicon to itself like PNY might or Gigabyte or whatever. This is a similar situation here. Now, there's a lot that goes into this formula, so it's not that simple, but it's something I was thinking about. So both PC World and Bloomberg asked us to join them on their podcasts this past week, and I did that. This is where I kind of thought through this stuff, where there's extra content we didn't publish. I'll link both below. If the Bloomberg one's up by now, then I'll put it down there. Otherwise, it'll be on their YouTube channel, and that's the Odd Lots podcast. And then Adam from PC World, friend of ours and friend of the show, I joined him, and we talked kind of the more technical side. So anyway, what I was trying to prepare for Bloomberg's discussion, because they wanted some more broader topics that were focused on supply chain, stuff like that, I realized that in the industry, it really is set up to where the factories potentially could get really aggressively competitive where other companies struggle to cut price further. So the example I brought up in the interview with Bloomberg was Deepcool, where Deepcool's banned now, but the example still works because there's other companies like them. So Deepcool, we visited their factory many years before, I think in 2019, it was when we were last, it was right before COVID. So 2019 is when we last visited Deepcool's factory. And what's interesting here is that, again, this is kind of ignoring the part where they're banned from the US because of the whole selling stuff to logistics companies in Russia thing, which we covered separately in the past. But separate from that, because Deepcool owns its factories and it sells products by Deepcool, they're kind of cutting a step in that supply chain where the company we saw having their stuff made there was Be Quiet at the time. So in 2019, I saw one of the, I think it was a Dark Rock cooler that was being manufactured in the same factory as whatever Assassin series cooler they were making at the time. And so you could see where, if you're Be Quiet, it's gonna be very difficult to sell for cheaper than your own supplier if they wanna compete with you. Now, obviously they do different things in some ways, and ultimately the factory does have more control over the cost. So to be clear, the manufacturers that we all know, like Noctua, Height, Be Quiet, whoever, they don't really own the factories they use, and that's fine. Contract manufacturing is normal. But what they do provide is engineering, testing, localization, marketing, which sounds kind of like a dirty word, but it is a valuable thing in these different markets around the world. So Noctua is a great example, does crazy amounts of engineering on their coolers that the factories don't really replicate and then go compete with on their own. So they all provide their own value, but when it comes down to cost cutting and competing on price, if consumer confidence goes down and spending goes down, I think there's a chance that these companies that own the factories may be in an advantaged position. Now, this gets into like macroeconomics, which I don't really know anything about, but just my gut instinct here from the industry is that speaking to, for example, Cooler Master, which owns its own factories, they're bringing in 4,000 pallets of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. And if they bring that in as their competitors are reducing intake to the US and sending it to other countries, then there may be a vacuum that forms where Cooler Master could then socket in and fill that demand if there is demand for it. And if there's not demand for it and everybody's bringing in or has brought in a lot of stuff for the last few months to stockpile up, you end up with a different situation, which is a price war. And this is something that Wei from Cooler Master mentioned in our Tariffs video, where if there's a price war, then what ends up happening is the companies that are the best positioned to reduce their price to consumers are the ones that are going to come out ahead. And the ones that just can't because they would lose too much money, obviously, there's a risk their volume goes down. So what this might mean for consumers and for the companies that sell to the US is that there might be a change in who's vying for what rank within the states, and that could change the pricing. So in the short term, if it's going up, then the companies that make their own stuff, they may be better positioned to absorb some of that cost. And part of that is if most of their workforce is out of the U.S., including the engineering outside of the U.S., and the wages are lower wherever they are, and the cost of living is lower and so forth, they're going to be the ones who have more room if the U.S. is one of their larger markets. So anyway, these are just some, like I said, sort of unstructured thoughts. Just extra stuff didn't make it into the video, and I was like, I don't know, maybe this is interesting to talk about. Like, a lot of people don't know that not only do most of these companies not own their own factories, but the factories they do work with, a lot of times they compete with them with their own brands. And so that makes it a really messy market for the smallest of the companies. And it's not like these aren't sticker factories. They're not just rebranding something from a factory. A lot of them are doing real engineering and real research and design and concepting, coming up with these ideas to do different things. So they're providing a really important input. But if that input is less valued because people are spending less, because they need to save more or whatever, or the price just goes up too much, then that's where I think people might look at competing products that are stripped down in feature set or are good enough and go, you know what, that's fine. And if that company is able to maintain a lower price because it is its own supplier, then they're in an advantaged position. So those are my totally unqualified, unstructured thoughts of, yes, I've been to factories. Surely I'm an expert and I can add something valuable here. So whether you agree or not, cool. But that's just kind of been my experiences traveling the industry and seeing this stuff, and it's just something I thought of. So hopefully it's not too useless for you. But if you want to hear more of stuff like that, you can check out the PC World or the Bloomberg podcasts that I joined. Very grateful to both of the groups of hosts who brought us on for that, and we'll link them below. Up next, Apple was being sued previously for anti-steering measures where it was trying to prevent developers in its app store from sending people externally to buy stuff. And if they bought things externally or through some other in-app purchase, then the developers were supposed to give some of that revenue share to Apple. That was how the store was set up, and basically Apple would get a cut of the sale. It was 30%. Epic Games sued Apple over this, so this went beyond just buying the app or the application on the App Store and stretched into the in-app or external purchases as well. A judge recently ruled in favor of developers not named Apple in a long-standing lawsuit against Apple, this one between Epic Games and them. In short, the ruling establishes that purchases from companies that have external solutions where they're selling a thing externally don't need to pay a split to Apple for that purchase. So developers are entitled to money made external to the App Store, in other words. The Verge elaborates that this ruling, quote, blocks the company, that's Apple, from restricting how developers can point users to where they can make purchases outside of apps. Apple says it will appeal the order, end quote. According to the publication, Judge Gonzalez-Rogers came down hard on Apple, with the publication reporting that the judge said that Apple, quote, willfully, end quote, did not comply with an injunction she made in her 2021 ruling on the matter. The judge is quoted as saying, quote, that Apple thought this court would tolerate such insubordination was a gross miscalculation, end quote. The Verge also added, quote, the judge also referred the case to the U.S. attorney to review it for possible criminal contempt proceedings, end quote. The Verge also notes that as a result of the ruling, Apple can't, quote, impose any commission or fee on purchases that consumers make outside an app, restrict developers' style, formatting, or placement of links for purchases outside of an app, block or limit the use of buttons or other calls to action, interfere with consumers' choice to leave an app with anything beyond a neutral message apprising users that they are going to a third-party site, end quote. Previously, it had various warnings about lack of returns, lack of control over the external sites, and so forth, which could have potentially scared some consumers away from it and kept them on the App Store for purchases. As part of her ruling, the judge stated, quote, in the end, it doesn't even matter. Apple tried so hard and it got so far. Wait. Oh, that was just a reflex. It doesn't actually say that. Let's try that again. Quote, in the end, Apple sought to maintain a revenue stream worth billions in direct defiance of this court's injunction, end quote. Following the ruling, Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney tweeted, quote, no fees, all caps, not all caps, on web transactions. Game over for the Apple tax. Apple's 15 to 30% junk fees are now just as dead here in the US as they are in Europe under the Digital Markets Act. Unlawful here, unlawful there. Unlawful everywhere. Tim Sweeney's new nursery rhyme to read from his gaming chair. He also said, quote, 4 years, 4 months, 17 days, end quote. Sweeney subsequently tweeted, quote, we will return Fortnite to the US iOS App Store next week. Epic puts forth a peace proposal. If Apple extends the court's friction-free, Apple tax-free framework worldwide, will return Fortnite to the App Store worldwide and drop current and future litigation on the topic, end quote. There will likely be large-scale ramifications for companies that are developers on the App Store as a result of this ruling, because it doesn't just apply to Epic. Up next, AMD's 9070 and 9070 XT have largely remained unavailable for their MSRP since launch, and availability was limited at MSRP to begin with, but Computer Base and some other sources online, and we've just dug through it as well, are now consistently showing that it's just not the case that you can consistently get these cards for MSRP. AMD launched the Radeon RX 9070 XT and 9070 with prices of $600 and $550 for the floor. Partners can obviously price them up however they want, especially when they attach bells and whistles, but those bells and whistles have become disproportionately expensive, as we proved in the past. When the cards became available on March 6th, AMD executive Frank Gazer said on Twitter, quote, "Demand today for our new AMD Radeon cards has been phenomenal. We're working with our AIBs to replenish stock at our partners ASAP in the coming days and weeks. MSRP pricing, excluding region-specific tariffs and or taxes, will continue to be encouraged beyond today, so don't despair," end quote. And just to be clear here, Computer Base is talking about European prices, so the US tariffs wouldn't apply there as long as the inventory comes in to Europe, which it probably is. These companies are all big enough for that. We ran our own content piece with research detailing the percentage distribution of GPUs actually at MSRP, as opposed to those well above it previously. Although vendors can add accessories and increase the price from baseline, again, the increase for both the 50 and the 9070 series cards has been the highest set of percentage increases for partner models that we have ever seen. So we've made this point a couple times now, but in the fake MSRPs video we did, which is targeted at AMD, has a lot of data about this if you're curious, and in the, I think it was the paper launch video or one of the other NVIDIA ones we did, even the Kingpin cards previously from years past, the percent increase over baseline MSRP for those was lower than the percent increase over baseline MSRP for like cards that have a lower MSRP to begin with, but also for cards that aren't even these XOC cards with like 14 or 16 layer PCBs and a giant liquid cooler and personalized overclocking support. So it has gotten way out of control. Anyway, we already ran those pieces, but the new information is that German outlet Computer Base has tracked the RX 9070 XT and 9070 price changes since launch. Computer Base reported that the average selling price of the 9070 is 730 euros and the 9070 XT is 800 euros. And that's as of early May. This includes the VAT, or value-added tax. Computer Base said the recommended retail prices are 630 euros for the 9070 and 690 for the 9070 XT, and both cards cost significantly more than the recommended retail price. Computer Base also cited rumors that AMD supported retailers by providing discounts to sell the 9070 XT and 9070 at MSRP when the cards first launched. Computer Base said it's not clear whether AMD's program has continued. In our own checks with online US retailers, the 9070 XT and 9070 cards are often above MSRP or out of stock. Newegg listed several of the 9070 XT cards that are close to MSRP but are sold out. This will change by the time our editors show things on the screen, so the numbers you're seeing are probably going to be a little different than what I'm saying. But at the time we checked, among the cheaper options, Newegg had two XFX 9070 XT cards available for $850 and $860. Micro Center listed ASRock and Gigabyte 9070 XT models for $700 and $660 for in-store pickup. And when we tried to select a store for each card, Micro Center said the models were out of stock at all locations. On Amazon, the least expensive 9070 that we saw currently was the Power Color Hellhound card for $700. Price Tracker Camel shows that the Power Color card has increased from $630 to $700 over the last month. Now this one in particular could be related to tariffs. Product tracking site Track-A-Lacquer also demonstrates the price increases. Even when aggregating many online retailers, Track-A-Lacquer showed the majority of 9070 XT and 9070 cards are either above MSRP or sold out. Most 9070 XT cards are above $850. Further, Track-A-Lacquer showed how the Radeon cards sell out almost immediately after going on sale at MSRP. At Best Buy, the XFX Quicksilver AMD Radeon 9070 OC has a history of selling out mere minutes after going on sale at its $650 price. And Track-A-Lacquer identified the Gigabyte 9070 from Walmart as the cheapest in-stock 9070 card at $724, which is an insane price. But let's move on to the last story. Something fun. Half-Life 3 rumors. Apparently it's being play tested. I mean, there's like, on one hand, even stating a Half-Life 3 rumor is probably pointless. But on the other hand, we're so far into it at this point. I mean, it's been what, like 15 or 20 years? Like it's almost like you can't not report on it just because it's become kind of a tradition. Not doing so would it would feel like there's an absence. So here's the rumor of Half-Life 3. I have a really hard time believing anything about Half-Life 3 at this point, but eventually I'm going to say that, and then like the next day they're going to announce it. So piggybacking on previous Half-Life 3 rumors we've reported on, according to Tyler McVicker, Half-Life 3, or HLX, as Tyler is saying it's supposedly being called internally, is playable from beginning to end. In a live stream, the leaker stated, quote, HLX is being playtested so religiously and so widely that there are individuals who will just talk. I currently have avoided all of them, but I've been offered it by people who are trustworthy, and I know some of my contemporaries have been given it, so there is information out there about the plot. We finally get the subject of the sentence at the very end. Was handing on for dear life there. What is it? And will it be interesting? We don't know. Apparently, it is not going to be a VR title like Half-Life Alyx. This is something that the leaker stated when asked the question about it. And when asked what aspect of game development the game would push, the leaker stated realistic NPC AI and procedural generation. Great.
If you want to do something about this, I have heard rumors that the powerful crime lord Coleman is causing all sorts of chaos in the city.
Anyway, it's not entirely clear how the game will use procedural generation. That's certainly been used a lot in a lot of games that are very good, that have already been out forever. AI NPCs is interesting. There's ways that could actually be pretty good. There's ways it could be absolutely terrible. It just depends on the implementation. That would be a more recent development, though, so that's kind of interesting. And the leaker stated that it won't involve changing geometry for the procedural generation, but rather it apparently builds on the Left 4 Dead 2 AI director and is supposed to be better. So anyway, estimating when the game will release, the leaker stated, quote, if I had to guess, summer announcement, winter release, end quote. And that's enough to know in short order whether it's going to happen. So once again, I don't really want to, pardon me, I don't want to include this because it's so, normally when we have leaks that are like founded on nothing, you at least sort of have the history and track record of those types of leaks lining up to be true or provable in one way or the other. We can take a good guess at it if it's likely. This one, I don't know. But we put it in here because, like I said, at some point it's going to happen. I mean, I might be like 60 years old, but it's going to happen. There's going to be a Half-Life 3, maybe, probably. And when it does, we'll at least have a time-stamped news episode where I said the leak's probably not true and then it gets announced. So that would not be the worst-case scenario, though. That would at least mean we'd have something to benchmark. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersaccess.net to support us directly, like by grabbing one of our B-Stock Modmats. And you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus as well. We've added a couple things there recently. We put up a Patrons Ask GN episode if you want just kind of like an informal Q&A. And then we have an update on some of the stuff we're working on. So that's it. Thanks for watching. See you all next time.